So it's with pleasure to introduce Ganesh from Jazz Pharmaceutical. He's the Director of R&D, IT, Innovation, and Partnerships. He's been there for about a year and a half now, responsible for research, non-clinical development, and manufacturing technologies. He manages portfolios and products to transform R&D and early manufacturing. Prior to Jazz, he worked in leadership roles at Merck, Genentech, DuPont, and others. And today he'll be speaking about transforming discovery through development with a digital pipeline global architecture. Thank you very much, Ganesh.
Thank you. How's the audio? That's good? Great. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for giving me the time. So I wanted to talk about a digital transformation effort. It was really nice to see the last couple of talks focusing on lab operations and making sure that our scientists who are actually performing experiments are getting the support that they need. If we can go back to digital transformation, I think this is going to segue pretty well with a couple of the earlier talks, including Dave's earlier conversation about data strategy. So what I'd like to do is maybe connect some of the strategy with results. How do you get from the strategy into meaningful results? And I'll use this as a use case of something that worked, but a lot of my use cases will also be informed by a considerable amount of failure, because that is the best teacher, isn't it? Okay. So this use case is a digital pipeline, and I'll speak very specifically about the impact for industrial enzyme engineering. So this is an effort that is not at Jazz. It was at a previous company. And what I'd like to do then is, after highlighting some of the strategies by which we identified the areas of need, identified the problems that had to be addressed, including the strategy for resourcing and development. I'll also talk about how we chose the right metrics to look at in terms of value creation. And just to make this a little bit more different, I'll share some of my really hard pain points, what I call 8 management recommendations, to sort of connect you with, like, don't make these mistakes. These are the bad mistakes that are preventable. You don't have to do these. Okay, so I'm not the first one, and I won't be the only one, I think, the last one to bring up a consulting slide. But we've seen many iterations of this digital transformation failure. So only 30% of these large corporate investments involving R&D, IT, and finance, only 30% succeed as defined at the initiation of the effort. So there's a vast amount of woe. If you're lucky, most of them land and worry, but only a few of these actually win. I'll give an example for woe. So we had tried to develop something called ARC, Automation for Rapid Cloning. It involved integration of an entity registration system with inventory management, LIMS, and then we automated scripting to program a biomech robotic arm to do all of the dispensing for genetic engineering. Really cool name also. We really liked ARC, but it was a complete flop. So we spent a lot of time there, and it came down to we didn't really understand the complexity of the business users, and we didn't ask the right questions, and I think we got a little bit ambitious. With worry, we had another effort. We developed a data warehouse combining for a manufacturing group process information from SCADA systems, OSI Pi, SAP, and LIMS quality information from 12 plants into a vast data warehouse. And that was partially successful because the interface that we put on top was being used, a Spotfire interface, but only for downloading data from different plants from different groups. So not really the sophisticated correlation analysis between different batches for products produced at different time points. So that sophisticated usage wasn't there, but it was kind of being used at least to download some data, not what we expected. And I think the key learning there was that we didn't have a user base that was ready to leverage that technology capability. So we spent a lot of time and money building that out. For the win, This is something not as grand as that, but it's what I call the digital pipeline. And let's see. Oh yeah, before I go to that, so the adoption, the adoption aspect of these efforts we've all been involved is usually where a lot of our successes or efforts come through. So the execution, of course, is very important, but understanding what the right problem is to focus on is also the most important in terms of adoption. So I call this the technology hierarchy of needs. I think I saw Dave allude to this Maslow's more famous hierarchy of needs. I call this a technology hierarchy of needs. And what this is meant to represent is that there is a gradation of priorities that our business customers are looking at. So they care for the things first at the bottom, and if they're not satisfied, then what you're proposing that's more transformational is not going to fly. If they don't have network access or software access, they are rightfully going to scream. So we have to make sure that that's in place as a priority. But in terms of a development strategy or a strategy for an integrated architecture, these are also arranged in layers that make sense. So it's very difficult to create a predictive analytics workflow or do some type of data mining interface under search and prediction if you don't have structured data capture as a foundation. It's much easier to make sure that all of these layers are subsequently put in place. And sometimes if they're not, you might have a very nice, impactful search predictive analytics work case, but it might be one-off. It might be an ad-off project that's very good for one particular molecule, but it's not operationalized. It's not permanent. So when it comes to deciding what is worthwhile for digital transformation, I tend to look at what creates institutional innovation. Now, this is just my criteria, and I try to set a high bar, but I think we all have to establish our own criteria about what is digital transformation. So for me, innovation is if you're creating a new way of working within the organization that did not exist before. This one's key, if it's permanent. If it's no longer being used after you leave or your team leaves, then is it really a transformation? Unlikely. As far as impact, getting to the top here, I think the benefit and impact of our efforts, the investment, should be enterprise level. And this is rarely considered, but revenue drivers as well as expense reduction should be considered as part of the prioritization process. So this takes time to do all of this correctly. And this is another framework that I found helpful for communications and also for assessing. So these are very complex, very spendy projects, so we had to get a lot of budget approval for this. And I found that in terms of identifying what's the most important value, some of these classic IT portfolio metrics are very useful. So the purpose for these, whenever I've launched these efforts, and I think we all should have this type of rigor, is to use these value measure language because it's universally understood. You don't need to be a data scientist. You don't need to be a finance expert. These terms are very understandable by everyone, including the key decision makers in your IT group, in your finance group, what have you. So for the most part, I do have a bit of a business background, but I never liked return on investment. These IRR, NPV, these are just this is wags. But this gets a little bit more away from the hand waving. So it does describe more the value that we're intending from our investments. So here's the use case. So this was an example of a challenge statement that I made to my organization. Let's create a digital pipeline that matches our actual product pipeline. One where data produced across R&D's global sites are accessed through connected systems that were intentionally designed with end-to-end genealogy. So at the time, I was managing 5 R&D sites across the world, and the group they planned globally, but they're really acting locally from a data perspective and from a information management perspective. So what we wanted to do is challenge the group to say, hey, can we work in a more sophisticated way where we operationalize our ways of working that reflect our pipeline? Now, what that led to was 2 key systems. GEMS stands for Genetic Engineering Modification System. This is a custom application that we designed and implemented in Java in March 2017. We married that with a parallel effort to launch and replace the SCADA system. So the background for this project was dramatic transformation and corporate change at the company, where companies were being let go and divested, and new companies were coming all the time. So there was a lot of M&A activity, as well, which created opportunity. So we had some greenfield opportunity to develop something from scratch, but we also had a strong corporate need to integrate these sites, specifically these process development and production sites. So what we did was we tried to make sure that these 2 jumbo jets were landing on the same aircraft carrier at the same time, and then we made sure that they were integrated for information exchange. So, I mean, this is really the key giveaway slide. This is the schema and data model that I developed with our teams. So what you're seeing here is the complete entity registration systems needed for connecting discovery with process development. So we have the genes of interest, constructs. BioBricks is a term that we coined for getting to the other elements, genetic elements, for either strain engineering or protein engineering, such as promoters, sequencers, terminators, etc. Strain, expressions, fermentations, and purifications. We also have these integration points and the key entities and attributes that we're exchanging with our systems. So BERT Oscar is a batch processing system married to the SCADA system. The SCADA system was operating in real life between the West Coast and the East Coast. Big Bird is our inventory management system, also leveraging information from the digital pipeline. And then activity-based is what I actually first used Ziffo for several years ago. And that was for high throughput data capture and screening. And that was just a beast of a system to work with. And Ziffo really helped us out there. So the reason I'm showing this is that we iterated this data model during the conversations with our technology teams. And this became the organizational blueprint for our transformation effort. So this diagram came out all the time. And people would, non-technical people would critique the values, the attributes, and say, that's correct, oh, maybe you should add this one. So it really drove the conversation, and it also error-checked our processes. When you have a very good data model, which this one proved to be, it was also extensible to other future scenarios, the future technology development projects, et cetera. So we had found out that this was such a good data model, we were able to do something very, very difficult, which was universal strain registration. So our genetic entity registration system was doing so much high fidelity recording, we realized that we could also record genomic data gene modification as well in the recipient organisms. So that opened up a world of possibilities. I guess my final point is I'm a huge believer in integration and development. And with each level of system integration, we got a compounding return and value. So one system is great. If you do it well, 2 and 3 systems are even more useful and transformational. So this photo is the screenshot showing several generations of gene modification of the product, the synthetic biology workflow of the strain as well as the enzyme, going through several years. And the system was automatically able to recapitulate all of those design decisions. So this became very, very useful. As far as new capabilities, this is an investment. It was a complex project. It took 2 years. We have to be accountable. So the new capabilities that eventually this produced was entity management of full, complete genetic engineering processes. We had dual sites on the East Coast and the West Coast on the same system. Before they had legacy systems that were completely out of sync, but now they were twin to each other. Universal strain management, automated regular tracking and approval, a vault of sequencing and mass spec verified protein data. So this gets towards quality data. Once we had validated gold standard information linked with the information, then the vault became trustworthy. That became our true single source of truth. And then big data driven product insight across R&D. So this was so well organized that push of a button for the right person who had access, they can spit out vast volumes of information. So when our bioinformatics team eventually hired a machine learning scientist, she fell in love with this. She's like, oh my God, I don't have to spend 3 months doing data cleansing. And then as far as value metrics, the company really cared about this because it did facilitate M&A integration. From a capacity perspective, we had dual site production capacity and planning. So some of these bioreactors, they're large. 2,000 liters is basically the size of a Sierra Nevada brewery, so 2 stories. And we had a wealth of tanks now being managed centrally within our 2 systems. And we were able to decommission 3 burning platforms. IT and finance always likes that. And these are the current data that we have within the system. But as a scientist, the value came in the integration because our researchers were able to ask, taking from a hypothesis-driven perspective, ask us questions such as, what is the consequence of my choice of this signal sequence on the carbon yield and production at 2,000 liters? Because of the digital pipeline and the querying that we built into this, our researchers and our engineers could ask those type of questions that they were never able to do before. Okay, so now I'll switch tack and talk about some of the failures to avoid, some of the mistakes that you can avoid. And this is where I think we can try to connect the strategy with results. So this is a nice quote. I like to say, strategy, or like a vision without a strategy is just daydreaming. And a strategy without execution is just a wish list. I think Sun Tzu says this in a nice way as well. Okay, so I've went on and on about the import of a data model, but I think I really think it's very important. It becomes the blueprint for your future strategies. The time spent doing this well will save you so much future rework, and it can be sustainable for other future need. And if it's done well and it's adopted well by others, then it can spin off multiple continuous improvement projects. If you have these platforms well designed that have been adopted by your business, they'll run with it and try to improve it themselves. Okay, so these have digital transformation efforts, as many of us know. They have a higher implementation threshold, so it is worthwhile spending the time to do this schema development because customization is so much more important for this type of IT effort. DTs is not the same as a typical implementation. It requires a lot more attention. Okay, so now this is the time to get real. So we may have our beautiful strategy. We may have our beautiful decks that we socialize within our function, but there's usually one stakeholder group that we leave out, and that's shared services. And they have a point. They serve a purpose. They're protecting the organization, but they don't care about your strategy for digital transformation. But they need to be engaged. So tactics that I found useful for facilitating a master service agreement to go faster than 7 months was to proactively engage the leadership from these groups, legal, infrastructure, procurement, or any of these center of excellences, and then have them sit down in your steering committee, and then they're accountable. And they're also getting the information that they need. Including these necessary groups is also a good way to share credit. So everyone participates and everyone can ensure the success of the effort. Okay, I'm going to be brutal. We know this. researchers don't care about a digital transformation strategy at all. They only care about the results and not being disrupted. So it doesn't matter how well we socialize it. We have to create value and we have to get results. So sometimes you need to use social engineering. So we hear about incentives. Incentivizing adoption is important, carrots and sticks. Social engineering is also important. So in that example of where we're connecting research with development through the entity registration to SCADA, the tactic that I adopted that was very useful was mandating, proposing to leadership that anyone who wants to do a bioreactor run has to first register that organism and its protein into the entity registration system. So it was a nice balance. I wasn't asking for everything to be registered, only those things that would go into the bioprocess plant. And leadership loved it because it was an investment to go to plant level, and it created that genealogy. So there was that establishment of incentives. And then, of course, we have to be agile and nimble. Sometimes we have to discard our cherished features and respond to what the scientists actually want. So we need to make sure that our client has the skin in the game. I'll be quick here. If there's one thing that you can take away, this is it. Ask before any effort. Make sure that you get percentage time allocation from the SMEs. And not ask them to join as an SME. Get the percentage time allocation. And then make sure that their personal OKRs are linked. Now this sounds very harsh and very prescriptive, but for the SCADA system, it was essential. We had assigned to our effort 5 engineers who for 4 months were working on this digital transformation effort, 50% for 4 months. And that level of commitment was necessary. And it also creates accountability. People show up, they come prepared for their homework, and more importantly, those SMEs aren't being burdened to do work on top of your IT effort, your IT investment. So they need that space. They need that time to think. They need the time to do quality work. We're not going to get it right, so incorrect designs and understanding is inevitable. I think this is actually very good when this is exposed early, because then we can pivot and avoid a costly mistake. So let's treat it as a pivot opportunity. And maybe this is where we can talk about having ample resources. So our internal FTEs can only do so much. So before even launching any of these DT efforts, we need to make sure that we have ample resources onboarded already, because rework and iteration is so necessary. It's just going to happen. So we do a lot of COTS selection, build versus buy. I would say redefine our COTS selection criteria for the DT and build POCs and prototypes. So I think we're familiar with some of these. My most essential criteria for any of these 5 systems was to make sure that none of the languages were proprietary or coded in a proprietary format that made the system inaccessible to us, creating vendor lock-in. Obviously good APIs as well. Sometimes a technical team might value a system for other attributes that the end users may not. So usability needs to serve both groups, your technical team as well as the researchers. And the quality of the vendor support is essential. One example is for the SCADA system, we built 2 POCs and a prototype, like Siemens, Wonderware, and deductive automation. And our engineers wanted to keep on going and build it. But once we got to the point where we satisfied the proof of concept, then it was time to say, okay, let's build an actual prototype and see if the interface and integration with the control systems, all the things that do the heating, temperature control and mixing, all of that, the sensor measurements, if the candidate system was actually doing the data acquisition and processing as well as the control. And we needed to make sure of that because there was blow-up potential if the system was considered bad, configured badly. And by then we had complete trust in our selection. So sometimes it's all right to have throwaway POCs. The understanding and the knowledge is so much more valuable before you commit to the big technology. So spreading the vision and the mission is critical because we can only do so much by ourselves. So very practically, getting the vision and vision spread across can help decentralize teams. So if we know, for example, that we have this specific objective to create genealogy, what we saw was that our decentralized teams in Europe and Asia made sure to code that in and to work. So we weren't actually driving a lot of these integrations ourselves. That wasn't necessarily centrally managed, but because the decentralized teams who were doing a lot of the development, decentralized SMEs, knew that was our strategy, they were looking for opportunities to create, find master data and make sure that it could be integrated in a breadcrumb data genealogy. And of course, this ensures alignment and support during a very difficult journey. And this is where I think leadership needs to spend personal capital to get the digital transformation across the valley of death. So by definition, these efforts, they challenge the paradigm and they're going to provoke a lot of resistance. So we have to, as leaders, spend some of our capital to defend it and have some tough conversations. So one example of this was with our sourcing group. They didn't like having more than 2 systems of a category within the inventory. We had to challenge that. I had to go to legal. I had to go to my president and say, hey, we've been working off of this training license for the last 3-4 months. Let's get an exception. Likewise, we had to get our Center of Excellence for Automation and Process Control. Their view was that only they could do this type of work. Well, how about you sit with us on our team and supervise the work that we do is meeting corporate standards. And then they were fine. So sometimes we do have to broker negotiations. And with that, thanks for your time. Any questions?
Questions? Anybody? Questions? All right.
Good.
Thank you.